BJ, the first question is, how can we adapt these coping ways to compassion fatigue of healthcare workers?
Well, starters, let's just acknowledge that I think it's implied in a lot of things we say, but very often the patient is the one we presume needs to be coping. But caregivers, whether family, informal, friends, or us professional clinicians, we're all caregivers too in this writ large, in this big way. I think our feelings as the non-patient in the mix often get short shrift. There's not, we have hospitals built for patients, we've got support groups for patients, we've got all sorts of infrastructure. It's incomplete, it's inadequate, but at least there's some sense or some proof that the world is making space for patients. There's not so much proof that the world's making space for caregivers or clinicians in the same way. And so just acknowledging it, and I think it's the first part here, that especially if you're a good clinician, if you're listening, if you are compassionate, if you are empathetic, all traits which make you that are essential to being a good clinician. Well, of course, just to remind ourselves of the math, that means you are feeling their pain, their suffering becomes your own in some real ways. And over the course of a day or a week or a year of that, it adds up fast. So just to state the problem here, and why that can feel extra alienating, because we're not the sick ones, right? So we shouldn't need the help or something like that. But we do. We really, really, really do, especially these days with the pandemic. I feel for our clinician brothers and sisters. Oh my goodness. So back to your question. So that's a sort of setup to the answer, just to make space for it. But I would say anything we've discussed today, anything on our incomplete list of coping mechanisms and ways into dealing with reality, are just as relevant to a caregiver, professional or otherwise, as they are to a patient. All of them. This list is about coping with being a human being, really, and that includes feeling a bunch of hard things, even if you're the healthiest person in the world. So yeah, all of the above still work for caregivers, and then beyond that, I think it's on us too to continue to refine the culture of clinical work, to make space for this. We're kind of stuck with an old way of, especially on the medical side, where you're supposed to be these caregiving machines. Like, you're really good at your job, like you don't need to sleep, you're just caring for anyone who comes your way. Like that's this sort of weird pathologically altruistic model, the medical model sort of presumes. So yeah, in our individual lives, we need to go home at the end of the day, and we need to find a way to unload, to process. And during our day, we do too. Can't just hold our breath and get through the day. So yes, we need to individually take this on, but more of us need to share the fact that we're struggling, especially people in positions of leadership. If they're owning their own pain and their own struggles, then that helps de-shame it for the youngsters and the trainees coming up who don't absorb this idea that they're supposed to be emotionless and somehow not be hurt. It's impossible to not be hurt and be a thinking, feeling person. So my last comment here, just to summarize and wrap it up, is that we need to also continue to shift the culture in clinical work that acknowledges the caregivers and clinicians are human beings too, and with thoughts and feelings and huge piles of emotion that they take on in any one day. And over time, work this into our curricula, into the esprit de corps of healthcare. We need to encourage each other to take care of ourselves versus making fun of each other for daring to have needs, which is sort of the current mode.